first of all, there was a constant mystery about how Osho used dentistry, because it's not about dentistry. How can it be about dentistry? We used to have dental sessions. There'd be a period of time of dental sessions, and there'd be a period of time of no dental sessions. And when the period of time with dental, it would be intense. Morning, evening, many times. And it was never to do with teeth, except there was always some tooth situation going on. But I always had the impression that Osho was using teeth as a way to do whatever a master does. He was working on me through my work, right?
And, as you say before, in the dental sessions, he was talking to few people in a different way.
But that was that period of time with the books.
Okay.
You see, when he started doing, when he was talking individually to me, when he was doing things like,
give some time frame. Like
okay, so when we, yeah.
Pico, put that the camera includes you also a little bit.
No, I don't want to be included. I just want to make sure that I'm not included in my people.
Okay.
I just want to see 1 second.
So the time frame, let's make the time frame.
Okay, we finished the range just for the editing point of view.
So let's just see one at the ranch, the end of the ranch. Well, there were stories at the end of the ranch, but not specifically to do with dentistry. The books.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the ranch, the books, it was very plain at that time, and it had been plain to me and Amrito that Sheela was on some dreadful trip. We had no idea what she was doing. My mind could not go there. But when Amrita was poisoned the first time in 1984, it couldn't happen. Meaning he went into hospital not because he was sick. He went there because Vivek said, you need to go to hospital. And he said, why do I need to go to hospital? And she said, Puja is insisting that you go to hospital because you don't look well. It's true, he didn't look well. They'd been poisoning him for a year. Of course he didn't look well. So they got him into that hospital. Now when he went into the hospital, we could not visit. You weren't allowed to visit this place. But I went down and I climbed up the outside of the wall and I could talk to him through the window. So I went down and I talked to him through the window and he was fine. He was reading the newspaper, listening to...
What hospital was it?
Our hospital in there, and it was called, I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, it was our hospital. Was
our
not
hospital.
outside.
It's on the ranch, and Puja was in charge, and our doctor, everything. It was our hospital. And it was all our hospitals always had the same name, like Lao Tzu always had the same, but I can't remember for the moment the name of it. So it will come to me in a minute. So there we were, he was in this bed, reading his newspaper, listening to BBC Foreign Service, World Service. He loved that. He was perfectly fine. He was having his dinner, and he said to me, I'm here because Puja insists that I have a checkup. He said, I'm perfectly well. I came back, because Vivek had asked me to go, and I said, he's fine, there's nothing wrong with him. I go to sleep. Next morning, about 5:30, I can hear people talking. This is now in, where I live in Lao Tzu house, in Rajneeshpuram, so we got the right context. And I come out into the living room, half asleep, and there's Vivek talking to the American doctor who used to take care of Sheela, and they were whispering, and they looked terrible. And I said, what's happening? And they said, Devageet is dying. I said, what do you mean he's dying? I saw him like 8 hours ago. How can he be dying? They said, the doctor said, he's got this complete collapse of his immune system. He's got some infection which has completely taken over his body. And I said, but that's not possible. He went in last night, he was healthy. How can this happen? He said, well, it can happen anytime. You can get a small puncture in your intestines and you can get a peritonitis. I said, look, You can tell that to other people, but I know that doesn't happen to a healthy person. Something has to happen. He said, no, nothing happened. I knew something had to happen. This is not possible, but the fact is at that moment they didn't know how to keep him alive. So I went down immediately. I had a car then. I drove down and I come up outside the window, looking through the window, and there's Amrito in his bed, completely flaked out, with tubes everywhere. And there were about 4 sannyasin doctors all around him doing whatever. And then he was awake.
Why had to go from the outside wall?
Because I wasn't allowed to visit.
Okay.
They wouldn't allow people in. It was more like a bloody prison. So as I'm looking through the window, I can see that he's coming round. He wasn't unconscious. And then he saw me looking through the window because I'd been looking there the night before. He said, Geet, I've been poisoned. Get the bottle. Clonk, he goes out. What? Get the bottle. That's what he said, get the bottle. So, what? So I come back to Vivek, and she said, oh, he's just fucking paranoid. There's no bottle. He thinks he's always paranoid. I said, if he said there's something happened, that he got poisoned, something happened. So I went back again, and he's there. He's a bit more compos mentis at this time. And I said, what bottle? What are you talking about? He said, in the middle of the night, Pooja came, and she was putting something in my IV bottle. So I said, well, didn't you ask her? He said, yes. And she said, I'm putting vitamins in your IV bottle. He said, first of all, it's ridiculous that I'm getting IV water anyway. He said, I'm not dehydrated. But she's insisting that I have to be hydrated. And he said, to be hydrated is not a problem. But her putting stuff in there, and I said, well, what would she put in? He said, she said it was vitamins. And I said, well, vitamins can't create this. And he said, well, there must have been something on her fingers. What could be on her fingers? Because the bacteria that they found was a fecal bacteria, like shit. It was impossible. I come back to Vivek and say that he's got some massive infection. He thinks he's been poisoned by Pooja. And she got freaked out. She said, no, that's not possible. It's just him. He's making up these conspiracy theories, all of that. I went back again because she told Bhagwan, and Bhagwan said, get Geet to go down there and see what was happening. I went back there again, and he was beginning to recover. Now, at this point, I managed to come in and talk to him. I came around the back, or rather he came out on his bed. Somebody wheeled him out. And I said, what do you mean she poisoned you? Because we knew she was incompetent, we knew she was horrible, but poison? Like this is another league. And he said, I don't know, but if it wasn't intentional, it's got to be criminal negligence. And I said, well, what could it be? He said, well, it can only be shit. That particular, I've forgotten what it was, some bacterium. He said, it lives in shit. So I said, it must be that she had some shit on her fingers. He said, maybe. Now that was how it was. We at that time, this is 84, nobody was talking about anything like that because it was banned to say that, you're talking negatively. But he and I used to go out, and when we were smoking, we would say, it can't be that they're actually trying to poison you.
Also, you're both doctors.
Yeah. And then, over the course, say, the next weeks, it became apparent, so apparent that we were bugged. Like, for instance, I had some Osho dental session, and I phoned Nityama, my girlfriend, to say I won't be able to see her until later. Within minutes, Vidya is on the phone to me telling me that I should not use the telephone to phone my girlfriend. So I said, well, how did you know? She said, we know because this is the only telephone, and I'm what do I know about bugging? So in that moment, I realized, that telephone is bugged. And then others around the house knew too that they had been bugged in some way. We didn't quite know how. Then Sheela sent up a big picture to go into our lounge, where we lived. I knew it was bugged. And as it was coming in, I was saying to this picture, you're a fucking arsehole, Sheela. I know that this is bugged. And I know that you cannot tell me that it's bugged because you think it's a secret, but we know that it's bugged. I knew I was completely safe, right? So we put this picture in our lounge, knowing that we need to be careful about whatever we say because it's bugged. We never in any way dreamed that she'd bugged Osho. But now, looking back at it afterwards, of course, she bugged the whole bloody place. Anyway, at this point, knowing that Sheela was on this mad trip, and then as the situation developed, meaning that over the next months, Sheela got more and more into her trip, where she was... there were a couple of episodes of poisoning, you know, where many people in the ranch got poisoned. Now, afterwards, when I say afterwards, I mean after Sheela left and after Gita, her secretary, gave the letters to Osho, and they detailed what Sheela had been doing. There'd been a murder list, and Devageet was on it, Vivek was on it, and Rito was on them, you know, there are other people. People who were close to him. Now, where's the problem? The problem for her is that she wanted to be close to him with her people. Why? So that Puja could be in charge of Osho's medicines. Why? There's your answer. So that everybody around Osho was Sheela's person. That's what she tried to do. When she had this fictitious disease about the conjunctivitis in 1983, where she took everybody out of Lao Tzu because they've all got this disease, which nobody had any symptoms, she put all her people into Lao Tzu to take care of, and Puja was there. And that's exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to replace the people he had chosen with the people she had chosen. So that's all of that's in my book. That's another story. But in terms of dentistry...
Which book?
The first book, Bhagwan, Messiah of Life, Love and Laughter. Now, the second one is amusing anecdotes. So when we came to be leaving, how did we leave Rajneeshpuram? Well, it was when Osho had been to the Portland court for a bail hearing, and they had fined him and declared him guilty on these 2 accounts, and then deported him within 15 minutes. Now, he had made an arrangement, or an arrangement was there for a group of people to travel in the plane to be with him, his household staff. I was included in that, along with Haridas, but the 2 planes were not big enough for all of us, so 2 people had to stay behind. And Haridas, I think it was Haridas, although he joined later, I was told, and I said, it has to be me, because a dentist without his dental equipment is useless. What's the point? So I said, let it be me. So I was not on the world tour. So then off they go to parts unknown. And then while I was in England, you know, then a whole bunch of stuff. While I was in England, I was involved in this interview where Hugh Milne is saying these lies about Osho. And that's when I was returning from that interview in the middle of the night. I was getting phone calls from sannyasins, and then 3 hours later I get a phone call from a Rup in Geneva saying Osho has sent a message to her saying Devageet must write this book, and it's to be called Bhagwan, Messiah of Life, Love and Laughter, a subjective account of his life with me. And that's when I started writing. It was the most amazing synchronicity. You talk about synchronicity, like there was I coming out of this thing in the middle of the night in London thinking, why is it only the assholes who write the book? Why isn't it somebody who loves Osho who writes the book? I'm going to write a book. 3 hours later I get a telephone call through Switzerland from wherever he was, but I think it was at that point probably in Portugal. Where?
He was in Portugal.
I think he was in Portugal at that point. And then, when I came back, so like, I'll leave a gap, I came back to Pune, I came back to Bombay in 1986, the end of 1986. And there was a place for me in the house where Manisha and Amrito and those people were. And when we were there, I was still writing my book, you know, the book he'd asked me to. And then at that point, I thought I would like to go to Pune to see the old ashram. And so I remember going there, and I wrote an article for the Rajneeshpuram Times at the time, saying it was dusty and old. It was like walking into the fairy story Sleeping Beauty, where people had been asleep for 100 years, full of cobwebs. It was dirty. It carried nothing that I could remember of the fantastic energy field that had been there in 1981. As I come back from Bombay, I'm in a rickshaw. Bombay is huge. A rickshaw passes me in the opposite direction. Nandan is hanging out of the rickshaw saying, "Devageet, go back to Pune. Bhagwan is coming." So I immediately get on the train, and we're back in Pune, and we start putting all the stuff together. I remember now Jalal, he was doing some plumbing there, getting Osho's bedroom together because it was dirty. Somebody had been sleeping there. Jantiba, I think, somebody had been sleeping there. And so we put it all, and we were working through the night, and then on the day that Osho was meant to be coming, now here, we heard he's coming on Saturday, a Saturday. And there were only about 15 of us there. And we were all so excited, he's coming. And then about 9 o'clock we heard that it's been delayed because there was some police problem. Then at 11 o'clock we heard it had been delayed, there's another police problem. Then we got another thing, we don't know if he's coming tonight, he may be coming on Monday. Another police problem. And then we didn't know if he's coming when, and suddenly 2 o'clock in the morning there's the car. And we're all clapping, clapping and dancing and doing this. And Osho at the back of the car is sleeping. And Vivek pulls his foot. And he wakes up, he looks, smiles, sits up, namaste, and he's home, he's back in there. And now at that moment, Nityama and I were living in a room on the roof of Lao Tzu. We woke up that about 5 hours after that, or not 5, 4 hours after that, and we heard a commotion downstairs. I look out over the roof, and there's Lakshmi and Neelam and like 20 men. They looked like policemen, but they weren't in uniform. They were plainclothes police. And there was an argument going on, and I rushed down the stairs. What the fuck's going on? I rushed down the stairs, and I find that they were insisting that they all go into Osho's bedroom. I didn't know why or what, but then somebody told me that they want to take Osho out. They're not allowing him to be back in Pune.
He's Indian.
Indian. And so in the negotiations, I think it was either Lakshmi or Neelam, I don't know, they agreed that 2 people could come in, the commissioner or whoever it was, they could go in, and they were going to present Osho with this charge sheet which said he has to leave Pune now because he's a danger to the public peace. So Vivek told me what happened. These 2 men are in there, they come in shouting at Osho. Osho was in his bed, he started shouting back at them, Vivek standing watching them. They threw this piece of paper on the bed, Osho tore it up and threw it back at them.
You saw that?
No, I didn't see it. Vivek's telling me.
Okay.
And then Vivek had a brainwave. She asked the men, she said, "Gentlemen, would you like tea and donuts?" Like out of nowhere. Now somebody had understood, brilliant intuition, they'd cooked like hundreds of donuts in the kitchen because outside the ashram gates there were 2 lorry loads of soldiers ready to take him away. They had taken all the donuts to the soldiers, brought half a dozen into Lao Tzu. There were musicians playing. Within half an hour it had all gone. What happened was our lawyer, whoever it was at the time, said, "We're going to take it to the courts and seek an injunction against this thing." And of course, that's when he began talking that night about the police commissioner, and that went on for hours. He would speak for 4 hours every night with these jokes about these terrible...
somebody stopped the police to take him away, basically.
Absolutely. Not only did they stop, they got rid of the police commissioner. after a few months. But it was part of the whole game that we felt...
Besides, he's Indian, where they want to send him.
But the American government was putting pressure on. Get it. They didn't want him to start speaking again.
Somewhere the poor guy has to live also, no?
They didn't care where he lived. They didn't want him to speak. They didn't want him to be a public person. And that's why I believe that they tried to radiate him and they tried to poison him. But their poisoning, they were too clever. In their poisoning, they only gave him a small dose of thallium. That's how I see it, because thallium can kill you just like that. But the fact of it is that his body was wrecked by this. He was in intense pain for years after that episode there. And when he first publicly announced that he had these symptoms, his hair was falling out, he was in pain all the time, and he had pain, he was in pain, his hair was falling out, and a few other symptoms. Instantly, like he said that one evening, and the next morning, 4 major Indian newspapers, Rajneesh has AIDS.
I remember that.
Yeah. So Osho, again, being completely brilliant, he called a press conference where he told Amrito, as his personal physician, that to show that he has not got AIDS, we're going to do a public AIDS test, which we did. I went down to the National Virology Institute because Osho had given me a message. You stay there with the blood, make sure they don't substitute the blood. So down there, then the AIDS test came back 2 days later or whenever it was. Of course, completely clear. And then the message through Amrito was, if this false accusation is ever made again, we will sue everybody. So that was part of the whole game that the poisoning was part of. They wanted to make him out to be some kind of dissolute, disgusting person, the person that they tried to make him out to be in the newspapers, racketeer, prostitution, drugs, stuff like that. And that was part of that whole thing. And then later, in 1989, when he was suffering it in December, with the sound waves and all the rest of it, he said, it's the same people. He said, they tried to kill me in America. They had a bomb that didn't blow up. They gave him this poison, and he said they wanted me to stop speaking, and now they're going to try and finish the job. And he said there are 3 people, and he said they're triangulating what they're doing. He said I could stop it, I could send back the energy that's creating this, but he said I don't do that. And then a few days later he's finished.